Okay, let's just address a midrashic idea. Someone says that yes, there are Kabbalistic sources which say that Mashiach ben Yosef is supposed to be a descendant of Yeravam ben Nevat. That's a little bit hard to say because the shot in the Navi is that Yeravam's family was completely wiped out. It says he had a son, Nadav, who took ill before Yeravam himself uh, died and passed the throne on to his, sorry, no, maybe it was Aviyah. Sorry, yeah, I think it was Aviyah. And his son Nadav was the one who took over. They also point out, it's interesting, Yeravam's two oldest sons apparently have names similar to those of Aaron's two sons. Aaron is the one who unwittingly led to the construction of the golden calf, and it was Yeravam who willingly, purposefully built the golden calf. And Yeravam's sons were called Nadav and Aviyah, just like Aaron's sons were called Nadav and Avihu. So it says here, Baithi Chala Aviyah ben Yeravam. So apparently this Aviyah is the first one mentioned. We haven't heard about Nadav yet. So maybe Aviyah is the second son, just like Avihu was the second son of Aaron. And Yeravam was succeeded by his son Nadav. So this Aviyah was rewarded, so to speak, by God through the words of the prophet. He said that Aviyah will die young and have a proper burial. All of Am Yisrael will mourn him for whatever reason, because he's the only one who has anything worthy among the house. And the rest of Yeravam's house would be wiped out. We don't know of any children to this Aviyah, especially because God had decreed that Yeravam's house would be completely wiped out. So it doesn't make sense that they would persist until the latter generations in Jewish history, that there be descendants of Yeravam among us. That's pshat. I just also wanted to point out, can you imagine that if Yeravam had succeeded in his divine mission as given to him by God, he would have done what God had wanted him to do as the Navi promised. So I would have imagined that eventually a Navi would have come and written down for posterity some sort of story describing a miraculous event in Yeravam's family history. Just like, for example, with David HaMelech, the Navi eventually put to writing a story involving the birth of King David's own grandfather, how it is that his grandfather came to be born. There was nothing miraculous necessarily in the story of Ruth and Boaz, just how it shows that these exemplary individuals carried on that line and brought Oved into this world. He was Jesse's father, of course, and it connects King David to an earlier biblical ancestor who was also illustrious, Machon Nadav. So too, if Yeravam had succeeded, the Navi would have shown us that somehow or other, Yeravam had been descended directly from Ephraim, somehow, probably not through Yeshua, because Yeshua, as far as we know, didn't have any male sons. He only had daughters. So there would have been something that would have been mentioned. The part of family history might have been included in Tanakh eventually. And then we would say that just like Mashiach ben David is, of course, going to be a descendant of the Davidic line, so too the Mashiach ben Yosef would be descended from this house Yeravam that wouldn't necessarily rule forever, but would have had a long and, once again, illustrious history with the Jewish people. The house of Yehu persisted among the Jews, even though they had been kicked off the throne after about 100 years of rule. They were not wiped out, and they persisted among the Jewish people even in Second Temple times, just like the descendants of Shaul, the first king, were well-known figures throughout the First Temple times and in the Babylonian exile, for example, Mordecai and Esther. So they trace back to King Saul's family. So there's no reason for that family to be wiped out. So they're still among us.